I was raised Catholic and went to a Catholic grade school and high school. It was Our Lady of Lourdes. And so as a young girl, I would always go into the grotto and I would pray for Mary to appear to me. And I would always, want that personal relationship of meeting a saint, or, I didn't know the term pure devotee, but that was my desire. I'd make flower garlands out of dandelions and put them on her. I'd sneak in and put them on her, and I would pray fervently for years and years. Of course, when I hit my teenage years, that kind of went to the wayside, but I always had that desire deep down. So after I met the devotees and they told me about Prabhupada, I was thinking, I have to meet him. I was in Ohio and they said the headquarters is in Los Angeles. So I thought, I got to get out there. So my parents were totally dismayed that I was not going to go to college, that I was going to take a little road trip, go out to California, and be back in a few months. So when I went out to LA, they said that Prabhupada was in San Francisco for the Rath Yatra. So I hitchhiked up with one lady devotee that I met. And of course, now that sounds horrible. It was horrible back then, but I didn't realize it. And so somehow or other we made it up there, and the temple was in San Francisco. It was a mortuary. So Prabhupada was coming in the morning. We came in the evening, and we stayed with all the ladies. And so the next morning, the ladies went up on the banister, and everyone had flowers in their hands. And so I was anticipating, finally Mary's coming through. I get to meet, a living spiritual person, and I was so excited. I really didn't know what to expect. It was kind of like meeting also like a rock star, because you read about him, you hear his music, you hear them speak, and now you're finally going to see him. So I was totally ramped up. So I was on the balcony, and tumultuous kirtan. As Prabhupada got closer, the kirtan became more and more fired up. And so then a big group of sannyasis walked in, and I didn't realize that Prabhupada was in the middle because Prabhupada was very small. And of course, just reading about him, you don't realize, you think he's 10 feet tall. So I was trying to see Prabhupada. And then the sannyasis parted a little bit, and there he was, that vision of that profile of Prabhupada. I had such a great view. I was a little bit above. So then what happened is all the ladies start not tossing gentle flower petals, but they were taking whole carnations and like belting them at Prabhupada. And Prabhupada was just, he was like getting hit. But I was seeing that Prabhupada was not at all agitated. That he had, he wasn't looking for respect for himself, that he was an ambassador for Krishna. And so he was totally grave. Any of us, someone knocks into us, steps on our foot, immediately, we want to retaliate or look at them or give them the evil eye. But Prabhupada was so transcendental. He had a mission, and he just glided on into the temple room, and that really amazed me. Prabhupada was coming. He had left Los Angeles in the summer of '75. At that time, I was already initiated, I believe, first initiation. So Prabhupada was coming. He pulls up, and all the big guns were with him, Brahmananda and Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Jayatirtha. And so we were on the roof of the house, and all the ladies had flower petals, and I felt like we were like the queens of Dwarka, that Prabhupada was coming, and the flower petals were going to come down from the heavenly planets. So Prabhupada pulls up, everyone was excited, chanting. So like in many places, we just found out, just recently that Prabhupada was coming, everyone was painting, cleaning, getting everything ready. So the devotees had this great idea, what we thought was a great idea. And we painted the sidewalk, this beautiful lotus flower. And then the steps that were leading up to the house, we painted the Hare Krishna mantra on the steps. So there was about 5 or 6 steps, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And because we were infants practically still at that time, we thought, wow, Prabhupada will really like this. He'll really show how Krishna conscious we are. Well, it certainly did show how Krishna conscious we weren't. So when Prabhupada gets out, big kirtan. He goes to walk up the steps and he realizes, he sees, that the Hare Krishna mantra is there. So I'm up on top, I have a good view, and I was seeing that Prabhupada was immediately disturbed, and he spoke to the next one, who spoke to the next one. And it stopped the Gunagraj Maharaj because he was the president, and he had to take responsibility. But then Prabhupada, of course, refused to walk up on the steps because the Hare Krishna mantra, he had taught us that Krishna and his name were non-different. So to walk on Krishna's name was such an offense. So Prabhupada walked around and went up the grass, up the embankment, and went around to the other side of the temple, just to show us that, what offense this was. So needless to say, very soon afterwards, the devotees were out there painting that over. So that was a good lesson for all of us. I was able to go to India in 1977, and that was, of course, the last year that Prabhupada was with us. So when we got to Mayapur, the ladies were given the rooftop of the kitchen. Now, the rooftop is exactly the rooftop. It had no plastic over it, it had no shelter at all. So we all got up there, and within a couple hours, a huge storm came. It was blowing everything away, and we were totally unprepared, and everyone got really sick. And so some of the girls I was with from San Diego became really like delirious. I mean, everyone was really sick, and there was no facility. The bathrooms the latrines were stopped up. It was a horrible flood. But Prabhupada was there, and he was giving the morning class. So the next morning, I don't know how I even made it to class. I crawled, really. It was quite a distance, but I had to see Prabhupada. So when I was in, and he gave the Bhagavatam class, it was talking about Prahlad Maharaj. It was during the time of the deprogramming in America, and so Prabhupada was talking a lot about Prahlad and his demoniac parents and like that. So I was listening, but I was really holding my stomach, and I was bending over and catching some of it, but really in pain. So after the class, Prabhupada would circumambulate, with the Gurukula boys, and he would go around, and so the devotees were up dancing, but I was sitting down because I was so sick. I was a little dizzy, I was feverish, and I was watching Prabhupada. He was circumambulating, and he would ring the bell, and each time he'd go around, he'd ring it a little, the devotees the kirtan was getting more and more fired up. And then I was watching Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was looking over in my direction. Of course, I thought he was looking right at me. And then Prabhupada, with his hand, he just gave a very beautiful, very wonderful, graceful gesture of rising above. He was taking his hand, and so with that one gesture, he uplifted me off my suffering bodily concept condition, and I jumped up and started dancing. And I was realizing at that time that not only was he lifting me, but he was lifting the whole world. He was lifting the whole world with, simply a mere gesture, because behind that gesture was all the potency of the disciplic succession, the parampara, Sri Krishna himself and his spiritual master. And I was transformed. For that brief time, I was totally transformed to the spiritual world, and it was ecstatic. And then after 3 times around, Prabhupada, went up with his entourage, and again, I kind of crumpled down to the floor and somehow crawled back to my room. But that was an amazing experience that I'll never forget. I was doing some service. In those days, they didn't have all the hired help, so they really depended on the devotees to cut vegetables, to help clean, all these things, which was nectar, because we know that devotional service is, Prabhupada gave that to us to help us control the mind, purify us. So I was in the deity room cleaning up. Everyone was gone, and I was doing the dishes. It was pretty simple. It was just a stove on the floor and some little countertops and things like that, but I was cleaning. And all of a sudden, Palika comes running in, and she said, Prabhupada wants to eat. He hasn't eaten in days. as we know, in that time in 1977, it was kind of the beginning of Prabhupada's difficult health period. So she said, "Please help me." And so I was like, "Help you? Will I help you? This is an amazing opportunity." So I remember she said, "He wants some apple juice." So I thought, well, where's the champion juicer? So she said, "No, you take a grater and you grate up an apple and then you put it in a cheesecloth and squeeze it." So I did that. I cut up some eggplant and things, and she was expert. So very quickly she made a nice meal and brought it up to Prabhupada. So I was done by that time. I was cleaned up afterwards and I was done, but I thought, here is my golden opportunity. There's nobody around. She's going to come down with that big Maha plate of Prabhupada, and I'm going to be able to get the whole thing. So I was, kind of dusting around, kind of waiting for her to come. So then she came down with a plate, beautiful plate, marble and everything. And so I was standing there. I said, "Oh, I'll help you transfer the plates." And she understood my mind, and she said, "Yes, you can do that." She said, "But Prabhupada just said that while he's sick like this, that no one should take his remnants." So she saw the horrified look on my face and gave me a little mercy, and she said, "Okay, tilt your head back." And she took his juice that I actually had made him, and it was halfway gone. And then she just poured it from that beautiful marble cup into my mouth. So even though I was disappointed on one hand that I couldn't enjoy more of the Maha, I was really appreciating how Prabhupada, in his bad health, the year of his death, just several more months and he would be leaving us, he was still concerned about his disciples and for the devotees not to take his remnants in case there was any kind of disease or anything like that. Of course, that's in his humility. Devotees would have lapped it up in a second, but Prabhupada was always so caring about the devotees, and it wasn't just when he was feeling good, because that's easy to do, but when you're in a difficult situation like that, to care about others, it really showed his magnanimous outlook and his personality and his caring, and that he really, really truly loved the devotees, and it came out in so many ways. And so I really got to experience that firsthand. So one of the services I did in San Diego was for the deities, and it was soon to be Rath Yatra in San Francisco, and they're making new carts, and they needed new canopies. And so they put out a call for seamstresses, and somehow or other, Gunagraj Maharaj knew that I could sew and gave me the mercy to go up there to do that. So I went up about 5 days or so before the Rath Yatra, and I was sewing, sewing in the sewing room. So it was a few days before Prabhupada came, and so when Prabhupada came, there was, they called a press conference. As we know, when Prabhupada would come to places, they would try to get the media to come and things. And so the press was there, and he invited all the devotees. There wasn't that many of us, so it was really intimate. So Prabhupada had just flown in from somewhere, I'm not sure where, and he was telling me that, or telling us that the pilot came on the plane, and he actually sat next to Prabhupada and said, "Your Grace, do you mind if I ask you some questions?" And so Prabhupada, always the gracious host and always anxious to share Krishna consciousness. And the man was very thoughtful because he had a great question, and Prabhupada was relating this to us and also in the press conference. The man said, "If God is good and all loving and great," Prabhupada is, agreeing, he said, "then why did God create evil?" And Prabhupada was telling us. So I told them that the sun is shining, very bright, it's beautiful, but if you turn your back on the sun, you create a shadow. It's not God, it's not the sun's fault. You created the shadow by turning your back. So similarly, when people turn their back on God, then evil is there. And then Prabhupada looked very innocently at us and he said, "Was that all right? Did I give a good answer?" And the devotees were just like clapping, and they said, "Oh, that was great, Prabhupada." And you could just see the very innocent, boy-like enthusiasm and really deep humility that he was really saying, "Was that all right? Did I give a good answer?" And it was so cute and so endearing to me that he would really bring us in and share that with us. So that was really special. One of the things that I really appreciated about being in the presence of Prabhupada was the excitement that Prabhupada brought. Even though Prabhupada never came with a big fanfare and he always kept such a humble profile, the love of the devotees when Prabhupada would come was so exciting and so contagious that even as a new devotee, the time I came in late 74, 75, the movement was so big. There's thousands and thousands of devotees, and everyone was hankering to get, a little bit of nectar from Prabhupada. But Prabhupada was so large and so big in his presence and his love that no one ever felt left out, even though I didn't get to go on a morning walk or have a personal conversation with him. I felt so included. He was so inclusive in his personality and his love that it really just radiated from him. So you felt really satisfied. Even though the devotees were, doing more intimate things with him, just to stay back and, help cook for him or clean his room. You felt such a connection with him that you didn't have to be personally present with him at the time to feel the mercy, to feel the grace that was coming from him. And even though that there was so much fanfare around him, Prabhupada just kept that humble, very meek and very grave demeanor about him. Sometimes people would say, that Prabhupada didn't smile enough, or in his pictures or something, that he was, wasn't like other gurus and things. But that was Prabhupada's grace, really, that he wasn't flashy, that he was always giving the attention to Krishna and away from himself. And in doing that, that endeared us even more to Prabhupada and his wonderful legacy that he left for us and for future generations. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to be a part of that, and am still trying in my small way to push on Krishna consciousness and push on the wonderful qualities and the love that Srila Prabhupada had for all of us and will continue to have into the next generations to come.